CNN 10, and we are thankful you're taking 10 minutes to watch. I'm Carl Azuz at the CNN Center. The Trump administration is considering a declaration that's significant around the world, whether to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And if the U.S. government does that, it could later move the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv, Israel, to the city of Jerusalem. Here's why that's significant. In 1980, Israel passed a law declaring Jerusalem to be its capital. It had seen the city as that for decades. But the United Nations said that declaration was against international law because it saw Jerusalem as an international city. Its population of around 850,000 people isn't particularly large as cities go, but Jerusalem's importance to the world's three major Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is tremendous.
At one level, it's a city like any other. People sell, people buy, normal life. But Jerusalem's old city is special. And this is the best vantage point, here on the Mount of Olives. The Dome of the Rock, a key holy site for Muslims. Behind it, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built on the site where many Christians believe Christ was crucified. And out of sight from this vantage point, the Western Wall, holy to Jews, supporting the mount where the temple once stood. It's not Jerusalem's significance that's in dispute, it's its status. After nearly 20 years divided by barbed wire, Israeli forces took control of the whole city, east and west, in 1967. The international community did not recognize what Israel called the unification of Jerusalem. Embassies stayed in Tel Aviv. And East Jerusalem was accepted by the international community as the capital of a future Palestinian state in a negotiated settlement between Israelis and Palestinians.
The United States has always had its embassy in Tel Aviv, a city about 30 miles northwest of Jerusalem. In 1995, the U.S. Congress passed a law requiring America to move its embassy to Jerusalem. International supporters of that, who include the Israeli government, say that the U.S. should recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and have its embassy there to show it. International opponents, who include Palestinians in the region, say if the U.S. moves its embassy to Jerusalem, it'll be a major setback to hopes for peace between Palestinians and Israelis. Despite the U.S. law passed in 1995, former Presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama have used something called a presidential waiver to avoid moving the American embassy. They've said it's necessary to keep the American embassy in Tel Aviv to protect U.S. national security. If President Donald Trump decides to move the embassy to Jerusalem, it's not likely to happen immediately. He's expected to keep the embassy in Tel Aviv for another 6 months and possibly move it after that. Stateside, the Trump administration had a Supreme Court ruling in its favor yesterday. Lower courts had partially blocked the government's latest travel restrictions on people entering the U.S. from these 8 other countries. But the Supreme Court put those blocks on hold, ruling yesterday that the entire ban could take effect. This wasn't a final decision on the legality of the Trump administration's travel ban. The ruling means it can go fully into effect for the time being while the legal process continues to play out in lower courts. 2 of them are hearing arguments on the ban's legality this week. 10-second trivia. In what U.S. state would you find the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monuments? Arizona, South Dakota, Idaho, or Utah? Both of these national monuments are in the Beehive state of Utah. And both are being reduced in size by the Trump administration. On a recommendation from the U.S. Interior Secretary, President Trump announced yesterday that Bears Ears National Monument would be shrunk from 1.35 million acres to about 220,000 acres, and that Grand Staircase Escalante from 1.9 million acres to just over 1 million acres. The administration says the federal government will still control the land and that it would still have environmental protections, but that what the decision does is open up more of it for ranchers to use as grazing land for their cattle and people to use for recreational vehicles. Environmental groups are planning to sue. The decision would make President Trump the first U.S. leader to notably shrink a national monument, and critics say the president doesn't have the power to do that. The Trump administration says it's confident it's doing the right thing and that the decision by previous administrations to expand the monuments in the first place put the land under the control of a small group in Washington instead of the people of Utah.
Let me show you the epicenter of what is the biggest environmental fight of the day. Yep, there they are. See those two buttes? Those are the Bears Ears, but they are just a tiny piece of this huge fight because Bears Ears National Monument is 1.35 million acres. That is over 2,000 square miles of wild western vistas, holding a potential fortune in oil, gas, and uranium underneath tens of thousands of Native American ruins. To folks like Mark Maryboy, these sites are worth more than any mineral. To the Navajo and Hopi, Zuni and Utes, these canyons hold the spirits of loved ones.
They live among us just like you and I were communicating.
These are your neighbors living here.
Yes.
The person who carved this art 1,200 years ago signed all their work with a wolf paw. But equally striking are the modern bullet holes. Just one sign of the tension that goes back to the first Mormon wagon trains.
They didn't want to work with us. In fact, one of the county commissioners says, you guys lost the war. You have no business talking about land planning process.
For generations, natives sought protection for this land, but it wasn't until the 5 tribes put aside their differences, rallied the support of rich outdoorsmen like Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard, and lobbied the feds that they got their wish. Weeks before leaving office, Barack Obama declared Bears Ears off limits to any new drilling or mining. And while some cheered the prospect of a new tourist economy, others saw it as pure tyranny.
It felt like a kind of a sucker punch. It didn't feel right. And it hasn't felt right for a year.
Phil Lyman is among the Trump supporters who spent the weekend cheering the president's decision to shrink Bears Ears by more than 80% and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument by nearly half. They point out that the biggest, poorest county in Utah already has 4 other parks and monuments. They don't want elites using their backyard as a playground and just want to control their own destiny.
By designating a monument, what you're doing is you're using a tool that will bring hordes of people to a place that is very sensitive. There's nothing that we want to unprotect. There's 13 layers of protection on artifacts and species and wildlife and vegetation.
There are loopholes in those rules that you can drive an oil rig through.
Josh Ewing came from Nebraska to climb rocks.
Painted sure, that's a rim of a bowl.
And fell so hard for the landscapes and history, he formed an advocacy group and is building a visitor center with whatever donations he can raise online.
If this place was anywhere else but southern Utah, I don't care if it was Mongolia or Zimbabwe, it would have been protected as a national park a long time ago. But because of the politics of Utah, this place is still a debate.
Here on Earth, pizza night's a crowd pleaser. Turns out it's the same thing in space. Not too long ago, an Italian space agency astronaut mentioned that he was missing his beloved pizza. So on a recent resupply mission, NASA sent some along. Might not have looked as good as what they serve in Naples, New York, or Chicago, and it costs an estimated $40,000 per pound to get supplies to the station. But Paolo Nespoli has been there for months, and everyone with him probably thought, now that's a good slice of pie. Of course, it took days to deliver, it was hardly oven fresh, and we doubt the driver got a tip. But if you're hungry for something that's truly out of this world, well, that's a meal for which you just gotta make space. I'm Carl Azuz for CNN.